wisdom of the middle way. Nagarjuna's Madhyamika. Translation and commentary by J.L. Garfield. Part 2, the text and commentary. Chapter 17, Examination of actions and their fruits. Arguing for the emptiness of bondage and liberation, however, raises a further question that demands an answer. If there is no real bondage and no real release, what are the effects of our actions? For it would appear, at least given standard Buddhist moral theory and the doctrine of karma on which it is grounded, that meritorious actions conduce to liberation, and that morally wrong actions increase bondage. Given the emptiness of these latter, an analysis of the consequences of action is in order. Nagarjuna begins with Buddhist moral truisms, accepted by the Madhyamika, as well as by members of other Buddhist schools. It is important to note that the first 19 verses of this chapter represent the views of 4 distinct opponents in order of increasing similitude to the Madhyamika understanding. Despite the fact that Nagarjuna sets these views up as targets, however, some of the views the opponents put on the table are, suitably interpreted, shared by Nagarjuna. Each can be seen as, despite being inadmissible as a characterization of a non-conventional basis for the relation between action and its effects, a reasonable empirical assessment of at least part of the conventional reality in this domain.
1. Self-restraint and benefiting others. With a compassionate mind is the Dharma. This is the seed for fruits in this and future lives. 2. The unsurpassed sage has said that actions are either intention or intentional. The varieties of these actions have been announced in many ways. The classification to which Nagarjuna refers is a partition of actions into mental and physical. Mental actions are mere intentions on this view. Physical actions and speech, generally distinguished in Buddhist psychology and action theory, are properly intentional. That is, the latter two involve a mental and a non-mental component. The mental actions only involve a mental component. Verse 3 clarifies this. 3. Of these, what is called intention is mental desire. What is called intentional comprises the physical and verbal. In the next verse, an opponent uses these truisms as a platform for the defense of the view that actions themselves must remain in existence until their consequences are observed. Actions that derive from renouncing the world are different from those that derive from worldly concerns. This difference in nature, he argues, must explain the difference in their consequences. 4. Speech and action and all kinds of unabandoned and abandoned actions and resolve. As well as 5. Virtuous and non-virtuous actions derived from pleasure. As well as intention and morality, these 7 are the kinds of action. The kinds of actions to which Nagarjuna's imaginary opponent refers are simply the various kinds of virtuous and non-virtuous actions. In general, morally good actions are done for the sake of pleasure for others. Morally bad actions sacrifice others' good for one's own pleasure. The opponent, however, goes further, pointing out that these actions have diverse long-term consequences that must be explained.
6. If until the time of ripening action had to remain in place, it would have to be permanent. If it has ceased, then having ceased, how will a fruit arise? The problem is this: given that the consequence of an action may be far in the future, something must persist to connect the action to the result. This is a kind of karmic analog of doubts about action at a distance. It is the same kind of move that lies behind trace theories of memory in recent philosophy of mind. So this first position is that there must be some permanent entity that remains in existence until the consequences of an action occur. A second possibility is that some third thing mediates the relation between action and consequence, a kind of karmic link that is generated by the action and remains in the psychophysical continuum until the consequence is produced. The interlocutor then offers an analogy popular in Buddhist philosophy. 7. As for a continuum, such as the sprout, it comes from a seed. From that arises the fruit. Without a seed, it would not come into being. That is, just as every actual fruit requires an actual seed as its predecessor, and a sprout to mediate between them, the opponent reasons, every consequence of action requires an actual action, and an actual karmic link between the action and the consequence. The next 3 verses extend this analogy. 8. Since from the seed comes the continuum, and from the continuum comes the fruit. The seed precedes the fruit. Therefore, there is neither non-existence nor permanence. That is, this interlocutor points out, the position developed in 17:5-6 requires that actions either be permanent or non-existent. His own view, on the other hand, allows actions to exist as impermanent and is, hence, more plausible. 9. So, in a mental continuum from a preceding intention, a consequent mental state arises. Without this, it would not arise. 10. Since from the intention comes the continuum, and from the continuum the fruit arises. Action precedes the fruit. Therefore, there is neither non-existence nor permanence. In the next verse, another opponent offers an orthodox formulation from a substantialist Buddhist school, arguing that particular kinds of action are described as the methods of attaining realization, and that particular rewards for the practitioner are mentioned as consequences of realization. The implication is that, since these are specified in Sutras as real, they must be inherently existent. 11. The 10 pure paths of action are the method of realizing the Dharma. These fruits of the Dharma in this and other lives are the 5 pleasures. The 10 paths simply denotes the totality of virtuous actions, as characterized by one of the Buddhist botanies of morally worthy action. The 5 pleasures are the pleasures appropriate to the various sense faculties. According to the opponent, all we need to do in order to reach enlightenment and to lead good lives is to act virtuously. The principal consequence of this is that we will enjoy temporal happiness. Yet another interlocutor replies that this wholly misunderstands the Buddha's explanation of the relation between action and its consequences. While it is the case that acting well is an important ingredient in Buddhist practice, and in any account of what it is to lead a good life, and while it is true that when one lives well, one in general is rewarded with material happiness, this hardly indicates that action, the agent, or the consequences of action are inherently existent. Rather, this more sophisticated opponent suggests, the nature of the link is completely abstract, like a legal obligation. 12. If such an analysis were advanced, there would be many great errors. Therefore, this analysis is not tenable here.
13. I will then explain what is tenable here, the analysis propounded by all Buddhas, self-conquerors, and disciples, according to which